Alright, so today we're going to work out whether we use sine rule or cosine rule when you've been given a triangle that's not right angled. So the first thing we do, this is my method of how to do this, and it works every single time. So you tick any given side. So if you've got a number on a side, you tick it. If you've been asked to find a side, you tick that as well. If you end up with 2 ticks, it's a sine rule question. If you end up with 3 ticks, it's a cosine rule question. It works every time. Alright, so in the first one, we're finding the value of the pronumeral, or the value of the letter. So here's the first question, and let's see how the ticks work. Here's a side we know, tick it. Here's a side we're finding, tick it. So we have 2 ticks. That means it's a sine rule question, and we're going to write down the sine rule for finding a side. So it's A over sine A equals B over sine B. Okay, so going from there, we're subbing in. We're going to call this little a, because that's what we're looking for. Angle A will be opposite it. Little b will be this other side, and angle B will be opposite it. So now we're subbing in. So instead of A, we're going to write K over sine 42 degrees equals 15.2 over sine 93 degrees. So remember what we do now, we have to get the letter by itself. So we're going to get rid of divided by sine 42. So we come to the other side, copy what we have, and times by sine 42 degrees. We're going to work it out, and then we're going to round it off. So let's just go to our calculator now. And you know how to do this by now, so we're going to press fraction key, 15.2, down arrow, sine 93, close the bracket, right arrow out of the fraction, times sine 42, close the bracket, press equals. So we end up with this. And we're going to 1 decimal place it asks for over here. So 1 decimal place, that's an 8, which is 5 or more. So we're going to multiply 1 to 10.2. We don't have any units on the end of this, so we'll just leave it as 10.2. You can write 10.2 units if you want to. All right, so looking at B. So we're going to do our ticks first. All right, so we're going to get our red pen, tick any side you've been given, and any side you're trying to find, and we are trying to find a side here. So we have 3 ticks. That means it's a cosine rule question. So we're going to write down the cosine rule for finding a side. So we start with little a. Remember, it's this long formula. Okay, and now we're going to sub in our letters. Well, let's just make sure we've got our letters right first. We're going to keep our little a. Angle A will be the angle opposite it. And B and C are the other 2 sides, and it doesn't matter which way around they go. Little b, little c. So subbing in, let's see what we've got. So we're up to here, now we're doing minus 2 times b is 7.1, times c is 8.4, times cos 115.6 degrees. All right. So we're going to our calculator now. Just put those time signs in so you know what you're doing. All right, so going to the calculator. We are doing 7.1 squared plus 8.4 squared minus 2 times 7.1 times 8.4 times cos 115.6, close the bracket, equals, and we'll write down what your answer has given you. It should be this. Do not clear your calculator, keep the number on. All right, so we're going to get rid of the squared now. So we're going to square root, do the opposite of squaring, which is square root of this whole number. And you're going to write it all down. No shortcuts. Okay, so we're going to our calculator to work out what that answer is. So remember, I haven't cleared my calculator from before, so I've got that still there. I'm going to press square root and then answer, press equals, and write down the answer. And this question is still to one decimal place over here. So draw the line after one decimal place. That's less than 5. So it will be staying at 13.1. And this one does have units, so we're going to write metres on the end. Okay, now in number 2, we're looking for an angle, but this method still works. So let's have a look. We're finding the value of we'll do our ticks first. So we're ticking any given side. Doesn't matter that we're finding an angle, we're still just ticking sides. And are we trying to find a side? No. So you're not going to tick this side here because there's nothing written there and you're not trying to find it. Okay, so let's have a look. 2 ticks. It's a sine rule question. So this time we're finding an angle. So I'm going to call this angle A because that's what we're looking for. And we'll start with our sine rule formula for finding an angle. Alright, so now we're going to sub in. We'll put the theta there for A over. Now little a is opposite angle A. So I'll put that little a in, which is 15. And then over here, the side and the angle that we've got, this little side is B, opposite will be angle B. So we're going to put those in. Sine 42 degrees over little b, which is 19. Okay, so we're trying to find theta. We've got to get the theta by itself. So first thing, we're getting rid of the divided by 15. So we'll come over here. We've still got sine theta over there. Write all of the right-hand side down. And now we're going to do the opposite, which is times 15. Keep the sine theta there, and we're going to work out what decimal we end up with here. Alright, so on your calculator, we're typing fraction key. On the top, sine 42. Close the bracket off, down arrow, 19. Right arrow out of your fraction, times 15 equals. And write down what you've got. Alright, now there's no rounding at all at the moment, so just always write the whole decimal down till we finish the question. Alright, so we're getting theta, so we're going to do the opposite of sine, which is inverse sine, and write that whole decimal down after it, in brackets. Alright, and now we're going to the calculator. So I've still got that number on my calculator from before, so I'm just doing shift, sine, answer, close the bracket off, and press equals. Okay, we are to the nearest degree here, so I'm going to copy that down because that's in degrees. And we want to go to the nearest degree. So nearest whole number, that's an 8, which is 5 or more, so we're going up by 1 to 32 degrees. Alright, next question. Starting off, we don't know whether we're using sine rule or cosine rule for these questions, so we're ticking our sides to find out. Tick any side you've been asked to find. We're not ticking this one at all because there's nothing given to you there and we're not trying to find it. So it's 2 ticks. It's a sine rule question. And we're finding an angle. So we're going to do the sine rule for finding an angle, which is this. we've got here. Let's look at this angle first, right? So let's see what happens if we put an A there because we're looking for that angle. Little a would be over here. Now that's a problem because we need this number, right? So what we've got to do, let's rub this out now because there's a problem here because I do not know little a. There's nothing written there. So this isn't going to work. So does that mean I've got the wrong rule? Does that mean that it's going to be a cosine rule question? No, it's definitely going to work, all right? But it's a little bit trickier, this question, so we've got to see what's going on. You must use these sides, okay? So why don't we just go over to this other side here first, and I'll show you what happens. So over here is always stuff that we know. So we need an angle and the opposite side to be our B's. So that will be angle B, and this will be little b across the other side from it. So that's sorted. I can sub that in now. That's sine of 64 degrees, sine of angle B, and little b is 13.1. So that means that this side here must be little a. Now you're going to say, well, that's not going to help because angle A is over here, and that's not what we're finding. No, it's not. But we're going to find that angle first anyway and see what happens. So we're going to find angle A, which is this one up the top here. All right, so let's just sub in. So now we've got, the only thing we don't know is this angle that we're looking for now. Sine A over little a equals sine B over little b, and there it all is subbed in. Okay, so now we're going to get rid of our 12.8. So instead of dividing by it over here, we're going to come to the other side and times by it. Right, so if we go to the calculator now and just type all of that in, you can do this on your own now. So fraction key, on the top, sine 64, close the bracket, down arrow, 13.1 on the bottom, right arrow, times 12.8 equals, and we'll write down what we've got. All right, next step, we've got to get A, don't clear your calculator. We've got to get A on its own, so we're getting rid of sine. Come over to the other side and do shift sine, or inverse sine. Right, now we're going to the calculator. Let's get rid of that out of the way for a moment. Okay, so we're pressing. Remember, I haven't cleared my calculator, I've kept it on there. Okay, so now we're doing shift sine of answer, press the close bracket, equals, I'll have to do it again. If you press the equals twice, it's going to not like what you're doing, so I'll just press this all in again. Okay, and the answer is this. Now this is in degrees, but we're rounding it in a minute. Okay, so we're rounding to the nearest degree for this question. So that's the nearest whole number. Draw your line after the whole number. We have a 4 there, so we're going to keep our degrees as they are, 61 degrees. All right, now the question up the top here. A little bit tricky, just be careful. We're ticking sides. Tick any given side. Right, so I've ticked all the sides because they gave me all of them. So if we've got 3 ticks, it's a cosine rule question. And we're finding an angle, so I'm writing the cosine rule down for finding an angle. And now we're going to sub in. Now be careful here because we've got this is our angle we're looking for. So we're going to call that A. That means that the side opposite that is little a. And our B and C are the other two sides. It doesn't matter which way around they go. And we're subbing in. Oh, instead of A, I'll call it theta like they have. All right, so now you go into your calculator with that big fraction. So let's type it in. We've got a fraction over there, so press your fraction key. On the top, we've got 21.2 squared plus 18.4 squared minus 12.9 squared. Down arrow, 2 times 21.2 times 18.4 equals, write down your answer, don't clear your calculator, keep it there. So we're getting rid of our cos now. We're doing shift cos on the other side. Okay, this one's again to the nearest degree. So we can just do this on the calculator today because I'm running out of room there. All right, so we had that there. We're doing shift cos of that answer. So it's shift cos, answer button, close the bracket off, press equals, press it once, not twice like I did before. Now I'm just going to skip one line here because we're running out of room. Round it off to the nearest whole number, that will be 37 degrees. All right, so now we're coming up to another question which is pretty tricky, and they love putting these questions in tests. So I'm going to go through it bit by bit. It's an application, not just any old triangle, but it does have a bit of everything in it, this question. So we are dealing with angles of elevation and depression here. This one's just angles of elevation. So we have a building over here, top and bottom of a building. And we've got the angles of elevation from two different positions of the top of this building. All right, now, one of those angles of elevation is 32 degrees and the other one is 55 degrees. So you know that an angle of elevation means you're looking straight out, looking up at the top of something. It's the angle that your eye moves through to focus up at it. Now, which one of those looks smaller? That one or that one? I think it's this one. So that's going to be the 32 degrees. The next one along that angle of elevation will be the 55. It's really important you get those in the right spot. So you'll be able to tell which one looks smaller. Now, the two positions are going to be 80 metres apart. So it's 80 metres from here to here. And then we start the question. So there's a few parts to this. The first bit is explain why angle ATB equals 23 degrees. So here's ATB. So it's this bit up the top here. Okay, we have to explain to them or show the working. That's what explain why means. We're going to show the working why that is going to be 23 degrees. So how can I find that angle? Well, let's find some other things that we know and then maybe we can work it out. All right, so have a look here. What's that angle there going to be? How do we get that? See how those two are on a straight line? So they have to add up to 180. So it's 180 minus 55, which equals 125 degrees. So we know that that angle is 125 degrees. So how are we going to find that little red one? Well, if you just look at this triangle here, these angles in this triangle have to add up to 180. And I've got two of them already now. So I'm just going to start with the 180 and take off the two angles I do know. Okay, so angle ATB will equal 180. Take off the 32 and take off the blue angle that I just found, the 125. So if you just get your calculator and work that out, what are we going to end up with? 23 degrees, which is what they wanted. Okay? Now, it does say explain why, so it's a bit like reasoning in geometry. You do have to give your reasons here. So for this one, it's angle sum of a triangle is 180 degrees. Okay? Make sure you give your reason for that. Down here, you should give a reason as well. So the reason for this one down here is angles on a straight line add up to 180 degrees. Okay, so make sure that you give all your reasoning as you're going through this working. So as long as they can see what you've done, that is your explaining why. All right, now the next bit. Find the length of BT. Now here's BT here. Now, this becomes a little bit complicated because a lot of boys will get confused because we've got three different triangles here. You've got one triangle here, that's a right angled triangle. You've got this triangle over here, that's a non-right angled triangle. And then you've got the complete big one, which is a right angled triangle. So there's actually three triangles in this diagram. So when you're looking for a side like we are here, you've got to say, well, what triangle is that part of? Well, it's part of this one over here, and it's also part of this one here. So which triangle are we going to use to find that side length? Which one has the most information in it? Which one has a side length that we can use? The only side length we have is this 80 here. So we must use this triangle over here. We have no side lengths over here, nothing to use. So you must use the triangle that looks like this. That's A, that's B, that's T. If we mark on what we know that's 80 metres. We're looking for this side here. We're looking for that one. And we've got lots of angles. We've got all three angles inside here. So we're going to just see which ones we actually need. So we're looking for this side. So we're going to call that little A. Let's get a red pen that works. And opposite that side is the angle we need. Now, be careful with these, they're a bit hard to follow, but that's your opposite angle. So we're going to be using that, and we do know that angle. It's 32 degrees. I actually gave you that one earlier. So we do know that, so we'll write it in. And then you're going to be using this for your little b, because it's the only side we have, and this will be the other angle that you're using, and we just found it. Or even if you didn't know it, they told you up there what it was going to be. They told you it was going to be 23 degrees. So now we're going to do our ticks, whether it's 2 or 3, and see what happens. So we're ticking a side we've been given, and we're ticking this side because we're trying to find it. So we know that 2 ticks means it's going to be a sine rule question. So now I'm going to start doing the sine rule for finding a side length. Here's the formula. And now I'm going to sub in. So we're looking for A over sine 32 degrees equals B, 80, over sine 23 degrees. Sorry, I should have marked in that's angle B there. And now we're going to solve our equation. So we're getting rid of this first. Keep what we have over here. And times by sine 32. So we're going to the calculator now, and then we're going to round it off after that. So get your calculator, and we're typing fraction key. 80 on the top, down arrow, sine 23, close the bracket, right arrow out of your fraction, times sine 32, close the bracket off and press equals, and that's what you end up with. So we're going to write it down. And then we're rounding to 2 decimal places now. Now, when you're rounding to 2 decimal places here, that's a 7, so this is going to go up by 1, but 9 can only go to 0, so we have to go up by 1 in the next one, and it's in metres. All right, now there's one more question to this. Now, before we go to the next question, I want you to get the answer that we've just got here, which is 108.50, or you can write it as 108.5, and write it on this side length, because you've just found that. And then you're going to come back over here to the original diagram and write it on the original diagram as well. All right, now the third part of the question says, hence, in other words, continue, use what you've just got as your answer. That's why I got you to write it in. Find the height h of the building. So we're looking for this now. So if we're going to be looking for this side, you've got to go, well, what is that part of? Which triangle? Well, it's part of this one, and it's also part of this big one. So which triangle of those are we going to use? Well, you've got to use where you know some side lengths. In the big triangle, I don't know any entire sides, so I'm not using that. So I am going to use this small right angle triangle here, and I'm going to redraw it over here so you can see it better. So this is all the information I have in the triangle, plus we already just found the 108.5 metres. So now we're going to find that side. Now you're in a right angled triangle now, so we're going to go back to our trig ratios and think about those, because we are in a right angled triangle. So if you look at that angle, I have the opposite side and I have the hypotenuse. So I'm going to use the sine ratio. So here's your formula. Hope you haven't forgotten it. And we're going to sub into that. So we have sine 55 degrees equals, opposite side is h, over 108.5. And we're going to get h by itself here. So we need to get rid of this. So instead of dividing by 108.5, we're going to times by 108.5. We normally write that at the front because people often forget to close the bracket on the end of the 55. But if you remember to close the bracket, you can write it on the end if you want. And we're going to go to our calculator, and in a minute we're going to round it off. Okay, so let's have a look. Just type in what you see. 108.5 times sine 55. Close the bracket, press equals, and there's our answer. Write it down. Okay, and we're going to the nearest metre this time, and these are in metres already, so we're going to the nearest whole number. So draw a line after the whole number. That's 5 or more, so we're going to be going up by 1 to 89 metres, and that's your answer. Okay, so it's your turn to have a go at this work. So remember what I said, tick any given side, and if you're looking for a side, tick that. 2 ticks, it's sine rule, and 3 ticks, it's cosine rule.